to the City Council meeting for the 18th of September, 2018. We're going to kick off this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll all rise and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you to the formal meeting this evening. Thank you for coming out, taking time out of your day, and joining us in the public process. I'd like to just go through a few reminders for decorum. This is a historic meeting room, so please be gentle on our furniture. If you have signs, which I see none, just be careful not to block anybody's view. Please do not approach the dais. If you have a handout during the public comment period, or if there's something you'd like to hand to the council members, you can give it to a staff member and they will hand it out to us. Again, our staff is here to help you, so if you need any assistance at all or any follow-up questions, please grab one of them and I can help direct you to them if you would like. When it comes to the public comment period, we recognize that 2 minutes is not a lot of time for you to get all of your thoughts out. So if you do have more to say, please know that your council members are available for one-on-one meetings, either here in the council office. Many of us are willing to meet with you out in the community. You can always email us or set up a phone call to discuss your issues further. So we are going to move on our agenda today. We are at item A4, which is the approval of minutes. So I will look for a motion.
So moved, or a move approval of, do you need me to read them or no?
And just for clarity, that's for Tuesday, July 31st, Tuesday, August 14th, as well as the formal meeting minutes of Tuesday, September 4th, 2018.
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved by Councilmember Mendenhall and a second by Councilmember Luke. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. We are now at the public hearing portion of our meeting. We have a few opportunities for public comment tonight, and we will call people based on the comment cards that have been turned in. I'm looking to staff. I don't know that we have any comment cards. No comment cards? No, okay.
There's one.
So it looks like we don't have any comment cards for B1 unless I see one in the audience. This is for the author, let's see, this comment. Public hearing number 1, or B1, is for authorizing the holding of a special bond election for streets and road improvement. Is that something you'd like to speak to, my friend? Sure. Yeah? Can you state your name for the record?
Yeah, it's Taylor Anderson. I've never spoken to the city council in this capacity before. I'm not sure that it's on that agenda item. It's actually on a capital improvement project that I think you guys heard about earlier in a work session, specifically 1700 South. So if this is the appropriate time, it's not the appropriate time.
This is not, but if you'd like to speak to us about our bond, I know you probably have something to say there.
No, I
pressure.
don't actually.
All right, thanks, Taylor. We will call you up during the general comment period for that. Okay, in that case, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Our second public hearing this evening is item B2 regarding an inland port and northwest quadrant development. And lo and behold, we have a number of people who'd like to speak to us. So I'm going to call these names 2 at a time. If I could have the first person come up to the dais, take your 2 minutes. The second person be ready in the queue.
Can I do an intro?
Oh, and I apologize. I was going to hand the time over to my fellow colleague, Erin Mendenhall, who has a few remarks she'd like to offer. So take it away, Erin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the past few weeks, the council's held a number of fact-finding sessions on the inland port. And the topics that we discussed in those briefings included the Inland Port Board itself, some of the subcommittees, their authority, future steps that they're looking at to advance the development of the port, and then also issues pertaining to local government, the environment, sustainability, economic development, and planning for future impacts to city budget and resources. And the council has heard many good suggestions about best practices for establishing a successful vision of the port, goal setting scenario, and goal setting and scenario planning for the port, encouragement for transparency and establishing public process, setting environmental baselines in order to measure future success for areas for improvement, and also establishing environmental goals to safeguard our air, land, and water resources. So tonight's public hearing is an opportunity for the public to voice concerns and ideas they have about the inland port and potential changes that can further refine and improve the Inland Port Authority. Our intent as the council is to use this feedback to inform the city entity and where appropriate, the state on potential changes and improvements that could be made to the Port Authority. This information will be shared with the Inland Port Board to consider as it establishes policies and processes for future development of the port, and of course that'll all be publicly accessible. This is a unique opportunity for the council to help shed light and on a complicated topic, and for the public we represent to have voices heard. So we look forward now, and thank you for coming out tonight. And we look forward to the years ahead of working with Salt Lake City legislators, stakeholders, and the community at large to facilitate the successful development of an inland port that creates opportunities for our region while respecting and hearing the voices of its neighbors. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for taking a moment for me.
Thank you for your comments, Councilmember Mendenhall. I'd like to open it up to other council members if you'd like to offer any remarks. Okay. All right, in that case, we're going to jump into the public hearing. So as I was mentioning, I have a number of comments here, so I'm going to start by reading 2 names at a time. The first person, please come up to the dais, to the mic, followed in the queue by the second person. First, we have Richard Holman, followed by Vicky Samuelson. So please come up, Richard, and take your 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Council, Mayor. Yogi Berra once said, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. The unfortunate part is we have too many forks. Let me throw some other silverware onto the road here. We had the opportunity to speak recently at the Inland Port Committee meeting. And some of the things we brought forward to them, I'd like you to also carry forward as you do your work. The first is the establishment of a community impact subcommittee as part of the Inland Port Commission. Nobody knows the community the way citizens know the community. And it falls incumbent on us to inform those that would make decisions as to the issues most important to us. Currently, we do have our representative, James Rogers, but it's a tall task, and it takes more people at the helm to make good decisions. So I strongly support the establishment of a subcommittee to provide input to the Commission on community impacts. The next issue is what I call the 3 W's. We're going to make decisions about tax increment, you're going to make decisions about environmental issues. All of these things are going to happen, but there are some foundational issues that I hope that we can start exploring now, because it's going to take starting now to make them work. The first is workforce, the second is wages, and the last is water. We have a tremendous opportunity to improve the workforce of the Northwest Quadrant, specifically on the west side of Salt Lake City. We have a great campus over there in West Point. We ought to explore opportunities with those that would use the port to employ people who have adequate training, and we ought to set up programs that target those kinds of industries we want to attract to the inland port. This is not hard to do. Other organizations have done it. I've done it with the Idaho National Laboratory in a former job. The second is wages.
Time.
We need to establish a living wage zone in the port. And finally, water. Where's the water coming from to make this work? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Holman. Up next, I have Vicky Samuelson, followed by David Shear.
Hi, I'm Vicky Samuelson, and thank you to the council for allowing me to speak.
Can you hold that mic right up to your mouth like a rock star?
Okay. Is
Thank
that
you.
better?
That's better.
Okay. This is a personal issue for me. I've found out that I live on the very west end of West Valley City, which bumps up against Magna. And the south border of the inland port is going to be my neighbor within about a half a mile. On the main road that goes into Magna and goes over to 5600 West is having major apartments build up. So, and now we're having major factories built out there, big warehousing buildings and everything. And I have since found out that there's one air quality monitor in Magna. It's over by where Kennecott's property starts. But there's nothing else from 5600 West over to about 9100 West in Magna. My concern is that with all of this building that's going on out there and the manufacturing that's going on out there, we don't have enough monitors out there to gauge the impact on our air. I can tell you it's bad because I know how I feel, and I can tell you it's bad when my husband's really having trouble breathing because he has COPD. So I want to know what is, and request gently, if somebody can put some more monitors out there so we can get a good baseline to know what the impact of that air is going to be on Magna and the very west end of West Valley City. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments to the City Council this evening. Up next, we have David Shear, followed by Marlene Jennings.
Evening. My name is David Shear. I live on Capitol Boulevard in Capitol Hill. I am often here on behalf of the Capitol Hill Neighborhood Council, of which I'm a member of the board, but tonight I'm here in my capacity, my professional capacity as an architect and a planner. I want to first applaud the planning staff for the tremendous job that they've done putting together a good draft so quickly. I think you all realize that the amount of time that was given in the ordinance to complete this rezone is not at all enough to do a thorough job. But this ordinance represents Salt Lake City's best last remaining opportunity to mitigate some of the negative impacts that the port's going to have on our air, our groundwater, wildlife, wetlands, surrounding neighborhoods, and our regional transportation network. Although the Port Authority Board has the legal authority to overturn city land use decisions, an ordinance with legally sound, clearly stated objective requirements that further the city's legitimate interest in safeguarding the health, safety, and welfare of its residents is less likely to be challenged by the board and more likely to be upheld in court. To help achieve that goal, I've suggested 5 modifications to the ordinance as proposed that would, in my opinion, help mitigate these negative impacts. I believe you have a copy of this sheet that was handed out. So I'll just read as many of them as my 2 minutes permit. I have, at the request of the Planning Division, found a model dark sky ordinance, which Salt Lake City currently does not have. And I have adapted it to the particular situation that we face, and the Planning Division is currently considering it. I've also suggested a few modifications to our noise ordinance that covers what I think are a few gaps that will be important in the port. I would also like them to consider a requirement to request, require.
That was your time, but
Okay, good.
Mr. Shear, we appreciate you writing your comments out and handing them to us. So
My
this is
pleasure.
helpful. We will read this. Thank you very much. All right, up next we have Marlene Jennings, followed by Heather Dove.
Council, I'm happy to be here tonight. I live in the West Point community, represented by James Rogers, and we appreciate his representation. When I think of the Northwest Quadrant and the inland port, my biggest concern is increase in traffic. I'm hoping that there will be a baseline so that you can tell when there is an increase in traffic and possibly have the state kick in some funds with respect to the needs there. In looking over the plans, I actually went through the zoning change and I see a need for public transportation. It said that there was a new facility that was going to be built on 2200 West. We've been hearing about buses coming with the new SLIC facility out there, and we hope it happens. Another concern I have is the tax increment has been specified as 2% to the Inland Port Authority and 10% to affordable housing. I'd really like to see a portion go to the schools. They're losing out on all the tax increment in that area. Now, I went over some things with Tran last week, met with her and went over the zoning, and the biggest surprise to me was the difference between light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing, and how much heavy manufacturing of railroad cars that's included in light manufacturing. So I'm thinking that there's probably some education that could be done on that factor. I thank you for your time and appreciate your service.
Thank you, Ms. Jennings. Up next, we have Heather Dove, followed by Steve Erickson.
Good evening. My name's Heather Dove, and I'm president of Great Salt Lake Audubon, and I'm here to talk about the birds and the people of the valley. Great Salt Lake hosts 10 million birds annually, many of whom migrate thousands of miles on their seasonal journey. The lake has been designated a globally important bird area, and it's included in the Western Shorebird Reserve Network. The Great Salt Lake ecosystem is a global treasure. The lake is the largest geophysical feature in the entire state. The lake and its mosaic of wetlands, uplands, playas, and mudflats are an intricate web of life. All the creatures that inhabit it, from the rich wealth of the microorganisms to the invertebrates and insects that feed on these organisms, to the birds that feed on the insects and the invertebrates, all these creatures perform a delicate, exquisitely timed annual dance. One creature's performance and function is dependent upon the other. The inland port being planned will be a massive project that will introduce a tremendous amount of pollution to the lake and to the valley. We appreciate that the natural areas and the buffer zone were preserved in the current plan, but rest assured that the environmental degradation will not stop at the buffer zone. Unless we use very careful study and smart design, the health of those birds of the Great Salt Lake and the people of the Salt Lake Valley will be seriously endangered due to environmental degradation. Just to name a few, air pollution, the birds suffer like we do. They have the same health consequences. Noise pollution, it's a great disturbance to nesting, resting, and foraging birds, and this will be a 24/7 project. Light pollution, very disturbing to birds. They migrate by the stars in the night sky, and the bright lights will create confusion and disorientation, which then can cause them to get off time on their migration, and they can arrive too early to take advantage of food sources. So I had more to say. I think you should make this 3 minutes, not 2. But I just want to really encourage you to really make the environment your primary focus as these plans go forward. If we don't, we will lose the natural world, and we will lose our health, and we will have nothing, and we can't get it back.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments to the City Council. Please feel free to send us your written comments via email. We will read them. Up next, I have Steve Erickson, followed by Joan Tabin.
Good evening. Steve Erickson. I live in the Avenues. I also represent the Utah Audubon Council as their policy advocate. So I want to thank Heather and others, including the National Audubon Society, which have submitted comments to the Planning Commission and to you all as well over this entire process. I've also submitted comments to the Planning Commission and to staff to go forward towards the Planning Commission. So I'll be brief about what I said and add a couple of things. One is you've passed a great sustainability ordinance. I don't know whether members of the board of the Port Authority have seen that ordinance yet, but I think it would be wise to deliver that to them so that they can read it, think about it, and inculcate it, and incorporate it into their thinking. So for starters. Secondly, I've appeared before this council numerous times on issues related to housing, and I wanted to give you a housing analogy. When home builders build homes in the valley and don't make them accessible from the beginning, or at least visitable for those with disabilities, it's extraordinarily expensive to go back and redo it later. So if we start with the premise that this port should avoid impacts rather than simply mitigate after the fact, if we minimize impacts, if we monitor and manage those along the way, the compensation after the harm is done may not be so great. So I've offered some language for the staff and Planning Commission to look at in that regard. I would like to reiterate that what you've heard about light pollution, dark skies, noise, in the inland port area as this development goes forward. In the overlay draft, there's no mention of those issues, and so unless they're incorporated, that needs to be dealt with. And then lastly, I'll just end with one little heads up, that sometimes radioactive waste comes through the place that will soon be the inland port operational. That's on its way to Energy Solutions. It sometimes is parked there for a while. You have another one that could happen down the road, and that's the Yucca Mountain project. The House of Representatives of the Congress of the United States has voted for the Yucca Mountain project to go forward. The Senate will vote in November after the elections. We may see that back on the table, and that I would urge you to prohibit radioactive waste as a use and to make storage or temporary parking of radioactive waste in the inland port jurisdictional area a conditional use. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your red flags tonight, Mr. Erickson. Up next, we have Jean Tabin, followed by Catherine Fitzgerald.
Hi. I just want to say that I think we have been given, even entrusted with a unique and amazing ecosystem, which is the Great Salt Lake and its surrounding wetlands. It's a place which is, like the person from the Audubon said, critical to the survival of many migratory birds, including the white-faced ibis, the white pelican, snowy plover, to name a few. By continued building such as the prison now, the promontory garbage dump that's 1,000 feet from the shoreline on the Great Salt Lake, and now the inland port, we are putting this area, which is already threatened by low water levels and pollution, at increased risk. Without a healthy Great Salt Lake ecosystem, we are putting our own lives at risk. This ecosystem is essential for our water quality and even our air quality. If we destroy it, we are threatened by dust storms and worse. I challenge everyone that's involved with this to truly educate yourselves on the importance of the Great Salt Lake ecosystem and learn about the biology of the Great Salt Lake ecosystem. And think beyond short-term economic gains, but think how this is going to affect our future and that of our ancestors and the environment that they will depend on. And you know, it's the birds, it's pronged deer or whatever, that there's a herd there. We have to think about what we're doing and to this land that we've been entrusted with. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments to the City Council meeting, to the City Council. I'd like to just let the audience know that while we do take all your comments seriously, today is just a general comment on the inland port development. We will be anticipating a text amendment public hearing sometime in October. So if you have comments specific to the land use and the zoning and the planning of the Northwest Quadrant, keep in mind you'll have a more formal opportunity to provide feedback sometime in October. So up next we have Catherine Fitzgerald, followed shortly by Adam Guyman. Please take it away.
Hello, I'm Catherine Fitzgerald. I'm just an ordinary citizen representing myself, not anyone else. I'm a citizen who is concerned over the impact of the proposed inland port. I am concerned about the environmental impact of thousands of additional freight trains, cargo planes, and tankers, semis, gravel trucks that will be entering the Salt Lake Valley. How will particulate and gaseous pollution increase? What about noise pollution? What about the effects of this pollution and noise on migratory birds and wildlife that currently inhabits the undeveloped areas? Where is the environmental impact statement that spells out these consequences of the port? I am afraid that we are blindly and irresponsibly rushing into a project that will permanently alter the character of Salt Lake Valley, much for the worse. I ask that at least time be taken for a thorough environmental impact study so that we have facts on which to plan our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. Up next, I have Adam Guyman, followed by Nancy Berkman.
My name is Adam Guyman, and I'm rolling for Salt Lake County at large, seat 3 as a write-in, and I actually am very much against this inland port. It's going to create a lot of pollution. And as a matter of fact, the oil refinery shouldn't be here either. It's creating a lot of pollution. Plus, the money that is going for this could easily be going for public transportation to help more than just people with disabilities, but anyone and everyone get around a lot easier. Plus, housing, we still have a homeless problem, and there's so many things that are being put in the way, so many barriers that are already there, and working within the system that we're told we're supposed to be working within is not working because the system we're working within is not solving the problems, and so we need to make sure we take care of that. And I myself, I have an obstructive pulmonary lung disease and sleep apnea, and things like the air and the water quality are going to go down. It's already happening in places like Flint, Michigan, and other places around the country because of this. And we need to start living green instead of the way we're living right now.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Guyman. Up next, I have Nancy Barrickman, followed by Alex Johnson.
Hello, thank you, Council. And also, just briefly, thank you to everyone else who has made comments here. I think I'll be reiterating some of the things you've already said. I'm glad to see all of you out here making public comment. So I'm just going to start by saying I've only lived in Salt Lake City for 3 years. I live in Central City. And I moved from a very densely populated area on the East Coast. And it was remarkable to me, I grew up in Colorado, it was remarkable to me moving to the West and thinking that I would find open space and clean air. And I was shocked, literally shocked by the air pollution here in Salt Lake City. And I know we're all concerned about it, but my question is, how concerned are we? Are we concerned about the impact of this inland port? I think we're concerned in, as somebody pointed out, mitigating the problem. We don't want to mitigate it. We want the radical solution. We want the opportunity to say zero emissions in this inland port. And think about innovation, technological solutions that will allow that to happen. And this isn't just an issue of environmentalism. This is an issue of social justice, because environmentalism is not separated from justice in this world. A professor at the University of Utah, Professor Gonzalez, conducted a study across the valley, and he found the most impoverished neighborhoods across this valley are the ones that have the highest pollution. The ones that profit the least from a place like the inland port are the ones that will suffer the most. We have an opportunity to demand something different for everyone. We have the opportunity to demand justice. And I am just bringing up air quality, but I could bring up other issues as well. People have mentioned here already issues with wage labor. This is a huge problem all across this nation, the growing wealth inequality. We have an opportunity, a radical opportunity here to say, no, we will fight for decent wages in this area as well, not just profit for a few. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Up next, I have Alex Johnson, followed by Nigel Swaby.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm first going to touch on some things that other people have said, but I just feel that it's such an imperative issue that needs to be said so many times. The air in Salt Lake City is already beyond toxic and deadly. In fact, we have some of the worst air pollution in the world several days a year. We are on a trajectory to fail minimum pollution standards as defined by the EPA. The port will add over 1,000 commercial trucks daily, plus 24/7 pollution from the port and extra trains. I'm just curious, when we don't meet those standards now, how are we going to plan to keep our citizens safe from there, let alone meet the standards that our government already set forward? So as a citizen, I demand that we have a net zero port, or net zero waste pollution port, excuse me. Also, I want to bring up the old landfill that's underneath it, the North Temple landfill that lies underneath the site. Experts say it could cost up to $140 million and take up to 10 years to properly clean up. They've noted the existence of lead and many other toxic chemicals underneath the site, and if not properly cleaned up, could pose a serious threat to the environment and public health. So I also demand that if this goes forward, that we clean that up in a way that is not rushed and is the best for just the best way we could possibly clean it up. And thank you for letting me speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments tonight, Mr. Johnson. Up next, I have Nigel Swaby, followed by Kevin Lee Caster.
Thank you, Council. My name is Nigel Swaby. I'm the chair of the River District Chamber. We represent the west side of Salt Lake up to and including the inland port. I'm here to discuss a letter that was sent to the Planning Commission about 2 weeks ago, and a copy was sent to the mayor and to Councilman Johnston. There are 4 points in the letter regarding the zoning opportunity we have in front of us. The first is we're asking for a landscaping overlay on the inland port zone so that it doesn't we don't try and transform sand and beach into sod and sprinklers. It doesn't make sense. So we want to try and keep that as close to what it is now, and that will also help with some of the habitat issues. The second would be pavement restrictions on construction so that there isn't water displacement, improper water displacement. We'd like to see things gravel so that the water gets absorbed like it mostly would. The third thing would be to incentivize the efficiency of buildings and energy consumption and even production. Some of the plans that I've seen for this inland port have minimum building sizes of 500,000 square feet, and many of the buildings are going to be 1 million square foot footprints. So there needs to be something to address energy consumption. And finally, we'd like to see something that would address rail traffic. That part of the city is already cut off by existing rail lines, and having additional traffic there, although I've been assured that we're not going to see that, we'd still like to see a plan that comes from zoning that addresses additional rail traffic. Thank you.
Mr. Swaby, I would request that you, well, first of all, thank you for your actionable suggestions, and I would request that you send them to the rest of the council so that we can digest them as well.
I will do that.
All right, up next we have Kevin Lee Caster, followed by Mr. Darren Mann himself.
Thanks a lot, City Council, for taking so much time to try and get the public input on this. Thanks, Mayor, for listening to our concerns. Mainly, I know it's just general, and there's been a lot of environmental comments tying on to what Nigel just said. Porous pavement will help with water and pollution into the Great Salt Lake, and green roofs, as so many cities around the world are starting to mandate green roofs. That's a strong consideration. I understand that, you know, the people in this room aren't in charge of what's going to happen out there, but anyways, green roofs and the progress we've made with net zero airport being constructed and a net zero firehouse, I don't think it's too much to ask that the inland port be net zero energy so that the climate doesn't make climate any worse. Thanks a lot. Thanks again.
Thank you for your comments. Up next, Darren Mann, followed by Robin Adamson. And Robin is my last card tonight, so if you would like to speak and haven't had a chance to, please raise your hand or fill out a card and we can get you in the queue. Go ahead, Darren.
Thank you, Council, for letting me speak tonight. And again, I echo the thanks to everybody for voicing their concerns tonight. I'm here as the chair of the Environmental Caucus for Salt Lake County and Action Director of the SLC Air Protectors. And I'm really concerned about the overall process that's happened and the public comment that's been stifled within the negotiations of this inland coal port, as well as just the overall cost. Is this really the economic boon that has been sold to the public that proponents continue to talk about? I don't think so. What kind of jobs are we going to see when it comes in? Is it going to be more $13 an hour jobs when it's been proven through studies after studies that it's $17 minimum wage to make it here in this city when we have a housing crisis? And really, I'm starting to see that it's more backdoor dealings for a few individuals to profit over the suffering of all of the members of our communities. And in particular, I'm really concerned about a pipeline that's going to be used to export crude oil to the refineries, extending the life of our refineries, that will once again make a few individuals, such as Kem Gardner, very, very rich, while others suffer from leakages from the pollutants that are going to be coming from this inland port, from pipelines that are going to be extended or improved upon. So what is the cost that we're going to impose upon our people? Are we really taking that into consideration? And the public has consistently been stifled in their attempt to advocate for just a seat at the table. So as our representatives, when you're talking with individuals on the board, I really urge you to have us help you and encourage more public discourse with the Inland Port Board so that we can have more open and transparent meetings and so that we can all work together and find solutions for this inland port in a manner that benefits all of us and not just a few individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. Up next, we have Robin Adamson, and I think I have a few more cards coming my way.
Thank you for allowing us all the time to speak about this issue. Mayor Biskupski, thank you for all you've done with the inland port topic and holding the resistance against it. As a lot of people have brought up a lot of different issues, my main concern is that we are bringing in Amazon, who is already known to be guilty of corporate welfare. I want to know who's going to foot the bill for the corporate welfare that this state is going to have to provide these new workers that will be coming into an already overpopulated city, that we're already being told we're going to have to move out of the city in order to stay in Utah. So who's going to pay for food and the additional rent that is needed to support these workers? Also, with the added pollution, we already are behind only Portland in asthma-related deaths. We lose 14.5 million, or 14.5 people per million every year for asthma-related fatalities. We are only behind Portland, who loses 16. Portland already has a port, a seaport. So what are our numbers going to do once we add a port if we don't have a net zero port? We need to keep this net zero, and we need to keep the minimum wage to a livable wage. Otherwise, we're throwing money away, and will not be an economic boon. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Up next, I have Phil Triolo, followed by Melinda McElvey? McElwain. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I thank the council and the mayor for this opportunity. And I urge the council to support a resolution to require all meetings of the Inland Port Authority, I don't know if that's official, its official name, to be open so that we may be able to understand what is being planned and who is planning it. Democracy requires participation. The current process for planning the inland port is undemocratic and rigged to assure that larger business interests and the wealthy are served at the expense of Salt Lake citizens and our environment. Salt Lake City inhabitants will be most impacted by the inland port. We, and especially you as our representatives, should demand that all meetings on the inland port planning be open to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Triolo. Up next, I have Melinda McElwain, followed by Creighton Hart.
Thank you for having this public hearing. Who does this benefit, really? And I think it's time that we started thinking about beyond ourselves. We're in the sixth extinction, all right? So we have a major continental flyway here, and we're going to put a prison in it, and I forget the other thing, but this inland port, whose idea was this? We already have air quality problems in this valley, and I think that this is an opportunity for Salt Lake City to set an example of elevating environmental and health quality over money and greed and real estate. I would suggest that the inland port doesn't happen, ever. For us, for our families, for our children, for our grandchildren. Salt Lake, Utah should be leading the way in solar energy. Forget about, clean coal, and even natural gas, and not flaring anymore. And this inland port, it represents a huge pollution event for us here in this valley. And not just us, not just us. I'm a birder, so I take them into account. And there's a lot I don't know about the natural world, but I do know that this is a continental flyway, and if this inland port goes forward, that's just another huge intrusion on our native wildlife, never mind our air. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McElwain. Next, I have Creighton Hart, followed finally by Thea Brannon.
Thank you all. I understand that you guys are kind of a consequences of someone else's actions, and I applaud you for listening. And it was the state's doing, not the city's doing. So I don't know if there's any way we as citizens could maybe have a referendum where 10% of the voters could get this on a state ballot or a city ballot to see if its needs really are what the state wants, rather than a few interests. I've lived in the state close to 40 years, and I know that we already have a free inland port in Clearfield. It's called the Freeport Center. It's been there, it's got trail lines, it's touted 40 years ago as the, Freeport. So I don't know if we really need another one. And then secondly, if it does actually get built, the gentleman mentioned the size of the footprints of these buildings. We are having a new movement from petroleum-less cars to electric cars, and maybe we could use these roofs, if they are built, as our charging stations. We're going to have a huge need for electricity that we don't even imagine yet. I mean, we're going to trade one problem for another, and then I just think we all ought to make decisions how it's going to affect our kids, our grandkids, and the environment. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Hart. Up next, I have Thea Brannon.
Hi. Thanks for having this public hearing. Not that it would really affect in any way the building of the inland port. I know that you're hostage to the Utah legislature, despite a lot of effort. And I think that the most important thing for you to keep at the very front of your mind is that Salt Lake City is growing. It's a successful city. It's growing too fast right now. And we don't need an inland port. It's been perpetrated by certain developers and people whose interest is purely economical, purely. They must not care about the air or the environment or the flyway or the lake or the water or the lack of energy. I don't understand it. It's the almighty dollar. So I know that there's only a certain amount that the city council and the city can do, and I just ask you to do everything you can to keep a solid front to make this port as zero emissions, as less impactful as you possibly can in every practical way that some people have suggested some very good ideas tonight. I beg you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brannon. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Mr.
All
Chair.
right. Yes, I'm going to open up to council members, and I would request that we take 2 minutes, just like the rest of the
That's
audience.
great. My 2 minutes is, I just appreciate everyone being here tonight to discuss the inland port. Being the member that sits on the board, I want to let you know, please come to the September 26th Inland Port Board meeting. It's at 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock at the state capitol, because really the decision makers are up at the Inland Port Board. So we need to hear your voice, have your concerns mentioned up there as well, so that moving forward, the Inland Port Board, I mean, we all know. I mean, you can see that the council has been deliberate in trying to be as transparent as possible. So in moving forward in that same manner, I would encourage everyone who has made a comment or has felt that they wanted to make a comment, please come September 26th to the Capitol from 4 to 6 for the next Inland Port Authority meeting. It's only the third one.
Thank you, Councilmember Rogers. Councilmember Mendenhall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo that and say that the comments we received tonight, and we've received many comments in different formats over the last several months, we'll be coalescing these comments into a report. Like I said at the beginning of the meeting, not everyone is here at that point. And our intention with this public hearing and the fact-finding sessions that we've held so far is to remain at the crux of the conversation between the community and the state and the Port Board as this advances. Be prepared for whatever may be coming down the road or the tracks, so to speak. And then to communicate what our community is saying and what the council's hearing to the Port Board for their consideration. And I think in contentious issues such as this, there can be some confusion. So I just want to make it clear, as many of you have said, that this is not a decision-making body on the Port Board, although we will have an ordinance up for consideration that relates to some components of it in October. We want to hear from you again then with regard to that. And that Mayor Biskupski's administration has advanced several action items to lay the groundwork for the inland port and to ensure success of the inland port. And that includes the creation of the Northwest Quadrant Master Plan designed around an inland port, the major streets plan for the Northwest Quadrant, and the formation of redevelopment project areas to catalyze this development for the inland port. So I think the recent contention that has happened isn't necessarily reflective of the fact that this city has been working towards an inland port for a very long time, and that includes the mayor and her administration. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me a moment.
You're welcome. Would anybody else like to take a few moments? In that case, no? Okay, in that case, I will look for a motion from my colleagues.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council close the public hearing and request that staff add the comments received during this public process to a report on the inland port fact-finding briefings.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Rogers. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that motion carries. We are now on to our next public hearing, which is item B3 regarding a resolution authorizing a building permit fee waiver for Shelter the Homeless Incorporated, which is the developer of our new homeless shelters. And in fact, I'm going to pause for just a moment while we let those who are leaving exit, and if you could do so as quietly as possible. Thank you. All right, staff, do we have any comment cards? I'm not seeing any. None? All right. Yes, sir. This is about the permit fee waiver for Shelter the Homeless. If you'd like to speak to that, speak now or forever hold your peace. All right, in that case, I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council close the public hearing and refer this item to the October 2nd council meeting for action as part of budget amendment number 1 of fiscal year 2019.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Fowler and a second by Councilmember Wharton. Any further discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, may I give you a piece of information about that last item?
Yes, please.
Just that there was a noticing problem on it, so you will very likely be seeing it on an agenda one more time.
I see.
Apologies for that.
Are we good with the motion as it was stated? Okay, great. We are moving on to item B4, which is a public hearing regarding an ordinance that would amend the final budget of Salt Lake City, including the employment staffing document for fiscal year 2018-2019. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this item? All right, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that the council continue public hearing to October 2nd.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Fowler. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. We are moving swiftly along to item B5, our public hearing, which is regarding a resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $1.25 billion aggregate principal amount of one or more series of airport revenue bonds, the Series 2018 bonds.
Move for approval.
Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to speak to this? Okay.
We need to close the public hearing. Move to close the public hearing.
Second. It's been moved by Councilmember Rogers and a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion?
May I have a moment?
Please take a moment.
To discuss. I just want to say that this airport redevelopment, which is really a new airport process, is an incredible asset to Salt Lake City and done without any taxpayer dollars. And I couldn't feel more strongly about supporting the progress of the airport.
So I'd like to also speak to that. Councilmember Fowler and I were actually at the airport this morning, and we had a spectacular tour of this amazing architectural and engineering feat, which will come in at LEED Gold certified, which is a fantastic point of pride for the City Council and the Mayor. You know, this is just under $4 billion public works project, the largest in the state of Utah, and it currently employs about 1,600 people. Walking through the concourse was an incredibly eye-opening, enlightening, and prideful moment for, I think, both Councilmember Fowler and I. And this will really be the crown jewel of our tourism industry in the state of Utah, I think. Director Wyatt, Bill Wyatt, mentioned to us today that this will likely be the only new airport constructed in the United States this century, which I thought was really fascinating. So I'm really proud, and thank you for letting me take a few moments. I will look for a further motion on this.
Mr. Chair,
I don't.
No more motion?
Yeah,
You're not
already-
taking any other action tonight.
Okay, great.
I'm not going to take any action right now, Mr.
All right,
Chair.
then we will vote on the motion as presented. Close the public hearing, excuse me.
We already did that.
Did we take the vote?
Yep. No, we just moved and seconded. we
Okay,
need
so
to vote
I'm
on it.
going to go for the vote.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries. Our next public hearing is item B6 regarding a resolution for the Central Business District Improvement Area 2019 designation. I do have one card tonight. That is for Jason Ford. So if we could have Mr. Ford come up, please. Take your 2 minutes.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Jason Ford. I'm the General Manager of the Sheraton Salt Lake City Hotel located at 150 West, 500 South. It is our intention to file a written protest to our assessment with the City Recorder of Salt Lake City as prescribed in the assessment. While we were assessed in the 2015, I would come back and say that we are not a member, nor are we represented by the Downtown Salt Lake City Alliance. We are not listed on its map as an available service. We do not receive any benefits from its programs, such as the Downtown Ambassador Program, and we do not benefit from any of the activities listed in the preliminary estimate we received. The holiday lighting assessment street nearest us, which is West Temple between 400 South and 200 South, is not adjacent to our property. Our hotel will not receive any aesthetic or financial benefit from these lights, as our main entrance is on 500 South and outside of the assessment area. We have no street access to 400 South. So unless there's an amendment to this, to expand the lighting streets so we're actually included in the benefits that come from this assessment, I would argue that this is illumination without representation. Appreciate your time and service. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us that heads up tonight. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to this? I'll look for a motion.
I move we close the public hearing.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mendenhall.
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Wharton. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and that motion carries. Our last public hearing this evening is a combined hearing of items B7 and B8 regarding grant applications for, first, the 2019 jurisdictions with Halfway House and Parole Violator Centers grant, and two, Child and Adult Care Food Program reimbursement for Youth City Snacks.
Mr. Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and refer items B7 and B8 to future consent agenda for action.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Next on our agenda, we have three potential action items. Our first item is C1 regarding an ordinance amending the zoning map pertaining to a parcel of property approximately located at 569 East 2nd Avenue to rezone the parcel from SR1A, which is Special Development Pattern Residential District, to SNB, or Small Neighborhood Business District. I'll look for a motion. Want to take this one, Morton?
Mr. Chair, I move the council adopt an ordinance rezoning the property at 569 East 2nd Avenue to small neighborhood business district.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Wharton and a second by Councilmember Rogers. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Next, the potential action item is C2, which is a resolution part of the state-required legal process for the streets reconstruction bond the council voted to place on the November ballot a few weeks ago. It outlines how, when, and where the public can vote on the bond. So I will look for a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, I move the council adopt a resolution providing for the conduct of the November 6, 2018 special streets reconstruction bond election.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Mendenhall and a second by Councilmember Wharton. All in favor?
Aye.
And that motion carries. All right, we are now into the comments section of our agenda. We will start by offering questions to the mayor from city council members.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I had actually hoped that we would actually have a council meeting where the mayor would be here. It looks like the time that the mayor is here, she's out grandstanding and raising a ruckus outside. I think it's very unfortunate that she's not in here in person to actually take questions from the city council. This is not anything new. I do want to thank Patrick Leary, our chief of staff, for always being here, as well as David Litvak, who is also usually here. Your representation is appreciated, but you're not the mayor. It would be nice to actually have her in the room occasionally, and when the meeting is taking place and she's out campaigning or doing whatever else she's doing, it is really, really irritating.
Thank you, Councilmember Luke. Anybody else?
I just heard the mayor said that they'll have their day in court. Mr. Leary, you know anything about the mayor bringing suit about Inland Port?
I don't think we're at a point to talk about that.
Well, she just announced it out there.
Well, I didn't hear it.
You will tonight. And I'm still waiting to hear back from anyone in the administration on my email. You guys interested in hearing where I'm at with Inland Port?
Yeah, give us a
I'd
call.
love to have you call me. I've been waiting.
James, you know where to find me.
Hey, you're the one that, you guys are out there talking all sorts of shit. You can come and talk to me. And I know it's not you, Patrick, and you're just the messenger, and I'd hate to have your job. That's the truth.
You know, I'd like to echo those concerns. You know, this is our formal meeting, and it's our opportunity to ask questions to the mayor on the record. And it is incredibly frustrating that she shows up and then leaves before we get our opportunity. And so I hope that you'll take our concerns and our frustrations and echo them to her in a meaningful way, because we'd like for once to have her show up and receive comments from the city council. It matters to us, and it matters to our constituents. All right, now that we've got that off the table, we're going to move on to item D2, which is our general comment period. And I know we've got at least one person in the audience waiting to speak to us. So I'm going to start by offering Taylor Anderson 2 minutes to speak to the city council about 17th South.
Oh, I thought this was on the Inland Port. I'm sorry. No, yeah, I think you guys heard about in a work session earlier, capital improvement project proposed by the Ballpark Community Council, originated from businesses on 17th South. It's effectively a lane reduction, a lane change. But I view it as a bike-friendly project because it would reduce the number of car lanes on that half-mile stretch of road. Seems like it would be more business-friendly and more community-friendly. So as well as, you know, if it makes it more inviting for bikers and people to travel outside of a car, it seems like it's in line with the city's goals to improve air quality. So hopefully when you guys, when this comes up for a vote, you guys will vote in favor of approving that capital improvement project.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Anybody else in the audience like to speak? All right. If you could state your name. If you could state your name for the record, and then please fill out one of these yellow cards afterward. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Michelle McCardle. First of all, thank you for all being here and listening. And Councilwoman Mendenhall specifically, since you're over my region, I really appreciate the time. I would like to express my frustration as well. I came here tonight to vent a little frustration that Mayor Biskupski is not answering emails regarding some complaints that our neighbors have had regarding foot traffic, drugs. We're finding needles on our streets. I live over on Rosewood Avenue. And it seems ironic that the only way that she responds is when we, tag her in Facebook. That's the only way. We have Neighborhood Watch, we've got all of these things. We've had several neighbors have sent letters complaining about, like, what are you doing? Great, I'm glad you're concerned about the inland port, we all are. But that's not the only thing going on in Salt Lake City. So she's not here, she's out there. That's frustrating. I appreciate you guys being here to listen. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. McCardle. And just for the record, I do have a card from Amir Cornell, who looks like he's left us. So I know he wanted to speak to us about ADUs, but for the record. All right. We don't have any new business today, no unfinished business, so that leaves us with the consent agenda. I'd like to look for a motion, but note that we are leaving off item G3, which will be rescheduled at a later date. So I will look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, so moved with those changes.
Second?
It's been moved by Councilmember Luke and a second by Councilmember Mendenhall. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries, and we are adjourned.